Welcome to Beyond the Screen, an IONOS podcast, where we share insights and tips to help you scale your business's online presence, hosting genuine conversations with the best in the web and IT industry, and exploring how the IONOS brand can help professionals and customers with their hosting and cloud issues. We're your hosts, Joe Nash and Liz Moy. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Screen, an IONOS podcast. Today we're joined by Aida Alonso Iglesias, who's not only a DevOps engineer at Voxel 51, an AI software company, but also a renowned Spanish rapper known as Aid. Aida is a shining example of how creativity and technical expertise can coexist, bringing a unique perspective to our discussion today. From her beginnings in the music industry to her journey in the tech world, she has continuously pushed boundaries, leaving an indelible mark in every field she steps into. Aida, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much for joining me. I am very excited to speak to you. I had a great deal of, I get sent a whole bunch of stuff about all of our guests before the show, and this has probably been the most entertaining dive into all of those materials I've ever had. I greatly enjoyed watching some of your recent videos. You've released a bunch of stuff recently, right?
Yeah, last week.
Well, congratulations. I hope that's going well. And actually, I think that'll be a fun place to start. Let's talk about your journey into tech. So obviously, I think if I'm correct, the music career came first. Is that right?
Yeah, it came first because it came at 14 years old.
Wow.
So I was still really young. So yeah, it did come first. But
Yeah.
it's kind of, I've been always doing both at the same time. I think they both are part of my identity. I didn't really, people tell me, take a decision, focus on something. But that wasn't for me.
Right. So there wasn't like a point in time when you were like, oh, I'm bored of this, I'm going to switch into tech. It was always kind of these two paths you were exploring kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I always had an interest on tech.
Yeah.
It feels magical, that you can open your car with your key.
Right.
Go back in time 500 years and you show them that, you're probably maybe they'll kill you or something. So I think it's pretty magical, and then music, it just talks to my soul. It's just, I think it's very similar to me, but yeah.
Interesting. So I guess so DevOps is obviously, the role you're currently in is quite a particular area of technology. Was there anything in particular that motivated you to explore DevOps in particular?
The short answer is no. The long answer is I started as a QA engineer.
Okay.
Out of college, kind of transition into kind of tried a little bit and transition into SRE, then software engineering, and then DevOps. Lately, I've been more able to kind of choose a path. And so DevOps is interesting to me because you have kind of an overview of the infrastructure. I think it's more challenging, and I think there's also more. It's more interesting from the engineering engineering.
Interesting. I think one of the, so when you were just talking about your historical interest in tech there, you gave the example of opening making devices to open cars and things, which I think is a very interesting example because that's very creative and hacky, which obviously your music background, I imagine there's a lot of interplay there in the creativity that you must be able to express as a musician, but also technologically. Do you find that is it a case of, hey, I've got my creative pursuit over here and my tech pursuit over there, or is there a lot of interplay between those?
Yeah, so unfortunately it's very difficult to be creative at the real job.
Sure.
At this point in my career. I think if you're just a DevOps engineer, it's really difficult to actually do something this creative because you got to do what you got to do.
Got a super creative CI pipeline going on here, right?
Yeah. So sometimes it can be, but usually it's not. So, but I do see technology as a way to. I think, let's say I draw something and I paint, something magical, some kind of fantasy.
Yeah.
I see that engineering is a way to make it real one day. I paint myself in the moon, then through engineering I can make myself in the moon someday.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Which I guess that leads me nicely into asking about your current role at Voxel 51, which I understand is kind of looking mostly at computer vision in AI. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
No, it's all good. So my understanding is you joined that role fairly recently, March this year, and I guess you've that must be just an absolutely fascinating time to have joined an AI company. I imagine your life has been a real roller coaster.
Yeah, it's definitely it is. I think the AI is a really interesting topic right now. Everybody's talking about it. There's a lot of work on it. There's a lot of movement, a lot of opinions. Photography, when it was invented, that some people say that photography is still their soul, and I think some people still, have this belief in. So regardless of what you do, there's always going to be some myth about something new.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating parallel. That reminds me as well of, like, when people talk about everyone always being on their phones, and then you see the old pictures of everyone reading like newspapers when print first happened, right? Yeah, that's a really interesting comparison.
Every moment has its own new thing, and you can see this pattern with music too. When Elvis was becoming really famous, and then everybody was saying it's not music.
Yeah, the rock is the devil's music and all this kind of stuff, and
kind of that. So it just keeps repeating, and each generation, including mine, I listen to the music in the radio nowadays, and I'm like, what is this crap? I'm just doing the same. I'm doing the same thing that people have been doing like over and over again.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see how that cycle plays out in tech. And I guess that leads us nicely into our topic for today, which is digital trust. Because obviously trust has been at the height of a lot of conversations about AI, but is also, very important in your work as a DevOps engineer. So I guess to kick us off, can you talk a little bit about what you mean by trust in the context of your work?
Yeah, so I guess digital trust is kind of a big term. Trust means belief. So from the perspective of a business, of organization, have the trust of your customers or the users of the platform means that they believe that what you provide is going to work. So I think DevOps, especially also the term SRE, that is kind of like sometimes confusing between has a lot to do with the trust from the observability, monitoring the incident response, the whole SRE life cycle. It's kind of a cycle. You try to prevent things to go wrong, and if they go wrong, you try to be able to monitor if it's going wrong. And then after you fix it. I don't know.
Right. So when it does go wrong, you're accountable to that, and you're able to report that, like, hey, this has gone wrong, and this is what we're doing to resolve it, and keep that trust building. And people have expectations to manage, I guess, is a core part there. So you mentioned a couple of terms there that our audience may be less familiar with, I guess, like observability, obviously SRE, the title itself. Do you find that they also, I guess, like what practices and frameworks do you think contribute to digital trust? Are those the you mentioned like those different disciplines? Are those kind of how you frame that idea, or is there tools and techniques you use to build up that trust picture?
I left something outside because you asked me about DevOps and more specific, but I think cybersecurity is a huge part too.
Right.
It's usually also not taken care of, at least in the places I've worked before.
Sure.
So I think it's a big part too, because if you don't have cybersecurity, what do you have?
Right.
It's kind of like main thing. So I'll say cybersecurity is important, and then test automation. So any framework, it doesn't matter the tool. And then some good incident response and monitoring tools, and some observability of what's going on in production of the environment, and then have some kind of process around a team that can respond to that.
That makes sense. You mentioned a couple of areas there that I guess pose particular difficulties to companies, like obviously having a cybersecurity, knowing that your platform is secure and having a response ready for that. What are some of the other major challenges that you think organizations face in building trust?
There's two. One is I've worked for startups mostly, so not having enough people to take care of everything.
Right.
So not having test automation, or not having observability, not having monitoring, not having incident response, not having a cybersecurity engineer. That happens almost all the time. So I'll say mostly that I think for bigger companies, most likely it's maybe lack of process, or just having things too stuck on the same place, and have to write too many papers in order to do something instead of just do it. And I think there is also one thing that I'll probably mention it later too, but it's that this is a little bit more of a general overview, but I think it's most the engineers and most professionals in the nowadays society are very specialized. So test automation engineer only knows about test automation engineering. cybersecurity engineer, they can, there's people that knows about a lot of things, but there's a lot of specialization. So with cybersecurity especially, I think it's important that everybody knows about cybersecurity, as well as test automation. Everybody should know about test automation, because the person that is writing a new feature is breaking the test as well. So I think everybody should know about a little bit about everything, and it's something that's not happening, that's breaking the process, and is making I see that's creating a lot of struggle through the way.
Right. So everyone needs that foundational layer of at least enough to understand the context and the requirements of what's happening, and then they have their specialisms, but they still need to understand what the person next to them is doing, that kind of stuff, right? I think
understand and have consideration about it.
Every engineer having some consideration of security issues would be very nice. Absolutely.
We should all have, I like some things, and I think I think individually as an engineer, is one of us, it should be it's our duty to try to be able to be proficient on a little bit of everything that is involved with security.
Right. I think, I can't remember who said it, but someone at some point said this thing to me, which was like, you don't necessarily have to know how to secure this application in a particular way, but you should recognize what you don't know how to secure and ask the person who does know, right? You should be able to say, hey, I don't know how to secure this. Put my hand up and say, can someone make sure this is secure, rather than just saying, oh, it's fine, and moving on.
The problem is that we know what we know, but we never know what we don't know. And that goes for
known knowns and unknown unknowns, and whatever the famous quote is. So obviously you mentioned there one thing, which is resourcing. Resourcing is a problem with a pretty clear solution, which is hire people. But what are some other practical steps that you think organizations can take to solve these problems and to build their digital trust?
Training. I think a way to break the gap between this hardcore specialization with the software engineers, focus on the code, and just this part of code will work and everything else doesn't matter, because SRE will take care of it. I think that could be cured by doing some training and maybe rewarding people for knowing things.
Right.
And because nobody want to learn something that is not in their job description anyway. So, so I think training and also doing some kind of cross disciplinary work sometimes, and do fun things too, because I think hackathons and those kind of things
are capture the flags for security, and
they're very helpful to get together and work in a project that is fun, and there's no better way to learn than have fun. I don't know how much I stress that, but there's no better way to learn than have fun, and when you have fun, you work better and everything just goes good.
Absolutely. Do you have an example of a training program that you've seen that's been really successful in doing this?
Wait, say that again?
Do you have an example of somewhere you've worked that's done this really well?
I think no place have done it perfect. I think perfect doesn't exist as well. But I think all the startups I work at, they're pretty similar on kind of trying to figure out this process.
Right.
I like working on startups because of this, but I think startups are also very busy constantly, and they don't have time to figure out. They kind of put away things that are not released, whatever the customer is asking for now, because if we don't have this, we don't have the money, and then we just we're not here. We all lose our job. So that kind of desperation situation, I think is really good for to speed things up. But I think it's bad in the part that things are considered not as important. That is usually test automation and observability. Those are kind of put away sometimes.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I can definitely see that when there's that pressure to keep the company going up until this next investment event or whatever, it's easy.
We all gotta eat.
Right. So I want to go back to cybersecurity, because you said you kind of gave the high level overview of its importance there, but you said you wanted to go back to it. So can you explain the role of cybersecurity in building that trust? And I guess it would be interesting to hear precisely what should businesses be doing to ensure that they're on top of cybersecurity threats?
I think they should hire a cybersecurity engineer, high specialized
Yeah.
first, and then ask him, how can we train everybody else on this, and then do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's a surprising amount of problems that I think we dance around in tech industry and various tech industry concerns that are like the real talk is like, hey, hire an expert in this. That we try to look for really complicated automated solutions to, and it's just no, just go hire the person who knows how to do that, please. I think moderation's another one that comes onto that.
You can learn yourself, but
Right.
if you have the money and you don't have the time, then
Right.
do it. But if you don't have the money, you have the time, then maybe learn it.
Yeah.
It just depends on the situation. But if you ask me about a company, companies usually have the money. So
sure. Yeah. And even going to the startup case that you were discussing, like, a startup might have the trade-off of like, oh, the expertise is going to be expensive, but like when you talk about cybersecurity, the expertise isn't going to be as expensive as you being hacked, right? There's a real cost benefit analysis to be done there.
I think there is a risk assessment that anybody with a business has to do, and you can be short-sighted or long-sighted, and it depends how you take your decisions. That'll play a role in however that thing goes in the long term. So if a lot of places are just driven by really I don't know what, but some other places they try to take decisions more in the long term and try to put these things into place, and sometimes it makes sense, sometimes sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but somebody that is able to think more than 2 weeks ahead should be able to think about the cybersecurity engineers is probably a good idea. If you get sued, it is going to be hard for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess to go back to some particular, techniques and tools for building trust in your organization, one of the concepts we hear about is the secure software development lifecycle, SSDLC. Have you encountered this? Would you say this is a tool for helping build digital trust?
Yeah, so it's I've been in places where there has been an effort to implement this. But however, the whole just the software lifecycle itself wasn't like fully working. With the part implementation part, testing part, the deployment part, and the monitoring parts. So it kind of gets really hard and really complicated to cover everything, and it goes back to the whole idea of is there enough people looking at all the parts here, or is just a bunch of engineers throwing things to production and just like closing their eyes. So most of the times I've seen that there was a will to cover this, but I think we talked about it before. If not everybody's aware of what security means, then nothing happens, because you make an app that is not secure, you deploy, and nobody knows about it until there is a security risk, and then that point is when we all put our hands in the head and start yelling and screaming.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So another area that I don't know if it interacts. Well, actually, I'm kind of intrigued to the extent to which it interacts with your role. So obviously, we're hearing more and more about the, data privacy and compliance with various privacy regulations, and those obviously are key components of digital trust from many vectors, knowing what the company's doing with your data and how they're treating it. How does that, how do you ensure that those issues are dealt with in your role as DevOps engineer?
I think there's different parts, and some are not even covered by DevOps. There is maybe I don't know if call it like a product side or a business side, which is the fairness, do things that are that you can audit, the transparency. Those are not kind of in our hands to implement, but those are things that have to be there, because if you're not transparent, then you're really not doing much. Nobody's going to trust you. Nobody's going to trust the product. If you don't audit things, then there's no logs of what you're doing, so it's also not something trustable. And there's also fairness, which is I think it's an interesting topic. I work for a company that we're working on fair lending analysis, which is pretty interesting. And fairness with AI now, it kind of gets it takes a new whole level of significance, because of all these protected categories and parameters when doing analysis of data of people. So that's a hot topic, and and I understand that it's a hot topic because it's really hard to it's really hard to deal with fairness in a AI model, like in a data set. If you have a data set of 100 people, and then 70% of people that are criminals are brunette people, and then 30% are blonde, and there you have you feed that to a AI, and then the AI thinks that brunette people are more criminals than blonde people for whatever reason. And so is that fair? That's the question. And then you can argue about that, obviously, all what you can, and that's what the argument is. But I think this fairness is I think fairness is really important too for trust, because if you don't offer something that seems fair to by whatever standards are the customers, then they're not gonna believe you.
Right. Do you find that, I mean, so we started talking about AI and the concerns of AI, and we've kind of come back around to it. Do you find where does being a DevOps engineer link into that in your role with dealing with AI? Is there much in your ability as an engineer in your day-to-day to build trust for the organization? Are you finding AI has a part to play in that?
I think it's a little bit out of my hands as a DevOps to play with like things like fairness or transparency. Because I think those are more like marketing or sales topics, maybe more business thing.
Right.
So within my job, I can work with privacy, cybersecurity, safety, reliability of the product. So it's more from a technical point of view.
Right.
I think words like fairness and transparency are more based on communication, like how you communicate and also what you show about the product to the users. So in that regard, I guess if the product is good and it works good, then yes, you can be transparent about it.
Right.
But if the product doesn't work good and there is something wrong about it, you can also be transparent and say this thing is not working, and we're going to fix it, or we are not going to fix it. And that honesty and that transparency is valuable. And that's not up to me because I'm on the technical side, but
sure.
But I'd say the auditing and having logged everything, that's something we can work on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we might have already covered this, talking about AI is going to be a big trend throughout the rest of the year, but do you think there are any significant changes or hurdles coming up that will affect how companies build and maintain trust?
I wish I knew, because then I'll invest in some
money.
Yeah. I'll invest in some companies. I'll retire early. No, I think AI is going pretty fast and is advancing a lot. I do have a personal opinion that about AI that is totally based on my perception, on my artistic perception. So it's probably wrong, but it is it's more what I feel than what I think. So and I've seen this with AI creating art. So when I create art with AI, I've seen wonderful art. I love it. It's amazing. It is a tool that is great. You can create these beautiful pictures. But when you create poems with AI, I feel, this is why I say it's I feel. It's not I think.
Yeah, of course. And this is an area that I think everyone is exploring and trying to work out, both, like how they feel, but also, the ethics and the more formal part of it. So I think, sharing how you feel is a space that everyone is currently trying to work out how they feel about, right?
Yeah. So I'll tell you the feeling, and then after I'll tell you why I think it might be.
Sure.
But I feel it's not as a human yet. Might be, will probably be in the future. I think it lacks something, but I can tell you why or what specific. It lacks something. It lacks error to me. It's like too good.
Right. And too good in what way? So I mean, not to make this, welcome to the poetry podcast. So like when you say like it lacks errors and like it's like, oh, the meter is too perfect, like in what way is it too good?
Yeah, it's like food without seasoning. It's
right. That's fantastic.
Something there is something missing. It's good, but it is missing. So I'm thinking that might be that's my theory, but I don't know.
That's
I also don't know that much about AI anyways. So but I think it could be because the models that are built, as far as I know, they are based on a simplification of how the human brain works, because we don't even know how the human brain works. We know there is neurons and things that connect neurons, and then we are like, okay, let's just make something that looks like a brain. But I think our brain is a little bit more complex than that. We still couldn't get, to know how exactly works. And because what we're doing is a simplification of our brain. It's not our brain itself. I think the results that it's providing is also a simplification of our own brain. So I still think there is just a little gap between what our brain is and what AI is. And at some point we'll be able to discover the brain at some point, and we'll be like, oh, okay, so that's how it was, and hopefully that's a great day to heal people from mental illnesses first, and then after that do AI.
Absolutely.
And other cool stuff.
And I think that's a very good point. I think a lot of people, like, when they, when we're talking about AI currently, we're talking about like large language models, right? Like these things that have been given all of the text on the internet. And I think people often get like the large language bit. They know that it's had lots of text, and they forget the model. They forget that like this is being applied to something that's meant to be, simulating a thinking process, or not a thinking process, but it's simulating a process. And they often critique like the data and the training, the text that's gone into it, and not the model bit. So I think that's a very good point. It's also fascinating that like when you think about like the way people have reacted to AI art, they're often pointing out the flaws, the fact that hands are weird, the fact that teeth are weird. And to hear that your issue with the poetry is like almost the opposite of that, is that it's like too shiny, it's too perfect, is really fascinating. That's such an interesting dichotomy. Thank you for sharing those feelings.
I think it's cool. I'm grateful that I can, do art and also engineering, because it gives you a little bit of a different view on art. And not everybody is able to, art is ambiguous, so it could be anything, but not everybody is sensitive to art as much as other people.
Sure.
And, so a person that is sensitive to art realizes that art is a kind of an act of revelry, and you want to do things really beautiful, but they're imperfect too. And so there is something about AI poetry that is not on human poetry. And there is human poetry that look like AI poetry. So don't get me wrong, but there is something there is missing, in my opinion.
That makes total sense. And I think that discussion on AI is a great way to close this out. But before we go, I have a slightly silly question for you, which maybe you've explored before, I don't know. If you could combine your musical career with your DevOps career and create a song, a performance about DevOps, what would it be called?
I've never thought about that.
That surprises me so much.
I'm currently working on projects that combine the knowledge on the two areas, but it's about a song specific. Really, I don't know. I would probably go with something that is fantasy. Something fantasy.
That cuts deep.
I'm kind of visualizing the music video first for some reason, but something with
it's a good way to start.
Something technology, maybe robots, or like some kind of like a virtual reality or augmented reality glasses, people walking, and then maybe kind of like post-apocalyptic vibe.
Right.
Maybe a song that is happy, but when you put a happy song in a sad environment, they kind of create that contrast. I guess something like that. It wouldn't be about DevOps specifically. It would be more about technology, about robots, or like something fantasy. Like
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today and chatting about digital trust. I've definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure our readers have as well. Listeners have as well. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Beyond the Screen, an IONOS podcast. To find out more about IONOS and how we're the go-to source for cutting-edge solutions in web development, visit ionos.com, and then make sure to search for IONOS in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at IONOS, thanks for listening.